Friday, January 10, 2014, 10:16 a.m. I had heard Brad coming from a mile off. It's hard not to. But I chose to ignore him for as long as possible. Now he's staring over the top of my cubicle, a deeply concerned frown set in a chubby face that droops over my partition. I haven't spoken to him since Wednesday night, and I can tell he's starting to get a bit anxious about it. "Are you ready, mate?" "Yes, I've just got to go to the loo quickly." Brad nods, and I head for the toilets. I walk into a cubicle, close the door, and sit down. I don't really need to go. I just want to take a few deep breaths. At home, I've come to regard the toilet as one of my few sanctuaries, a place where I can go to escape Kylie's nagging. In this case, I realize that I'm just putting off the inevitable. Mr. Dixon has insisted that I accompany Brad to a meeting with CIQ Iron, our biggest client, secured by me via some of Uncle Frank's contacts. But shortly after they engaged our firm's services, Mr. Dixon pulled me off the case. "They need a more sensitive touch, I think. With such an important client, we can't be too careful, Djurdjevic. Brad knows a lot about commercial law, so I think it's best that he look after them. You should tag along from time to time to learn how it's done," said Mr. Dixon. This is precisely what I'm supposed to be doing now, tagging along to learn how it's done. The fact that Brad has absolutely no idea at all about even basic contract law. He still regularly comes in to ask banal questions like, "Say, what is this offer and acceptance stuff about anyway?" Seems completely lost on Dixon. Mate, are you okay?" Brad is speaking through the door crack, trying to peer in. We don't want to be late. Lana and Sonia are already waiting in the car park." "Yes, coming out now," I say, standing up and pressing the flush button. As I open the door, Brad is waiting for me with a nervous grin. "The runs, eh?" "Yeah, I sometimes get him before a big meeting, but today I just know I'm going to shine." "Ha ha ha!" "You always do," I say, washing my hands. Meetings are Brad's modus operandi. It's been over a year since he was instructed to prepare the papers for one of CIQ's joint ventures. It is a fairly straightforward proposition, almost identical to many other contractual arrangements our client has negotiated in recent years. And I know that in this case there is broad consensus from all the parties on the fundamental terms. Yet somehow Brad has never managed to start drafting the necessary paperwork. Instead, he prepares endless flowcharts, diagrams that fold out with endless lines looping back and forth, connecting multiple boxes with queries. These he presents to the client at the whiteboard, where he raises complex issues no one would ever have thought existed. "Okay, the company's been around since 1962, but are you really sure that CIQ is properly incorporated? I think I found an irregularity that could well impact on my flowchart." To date, he still hasn't drafted a single word. I'm guessing this morning's meeting has been called to assuage the client's concerns, since the documentation is holding up the start of much bigger projects. And I'm almost certain that Brad will achieve his objective. He really is a master at what he does. I splash water on my face and straighten up. In the fluorescent lighting of the bathroom, I'm suddenly looking a lot older. Brad's reflection in the background is regarding me nervously. You know, mate, nothing happened the other night. I'm not trying to crack onto your missus. We're just good mates, like you and me, eh? I mean, I'd never do something like that. You know that, don't you?" I grab a paper towel, dry my face and hands, and then pop it into the overflowing waste paper basket. "Yes, I know that, Brad," I say wearily. Actually, I'm pretty sure he's telling me the truth. For a start, he has never had a girlfriend, that I know of anyway. If I were to hazard a guess, I'd say he's far too gutless to make a move on anyone. Apart from that, I think it's clear most women find him both physically and socially repulsive. I say most women because I'm willing to wager that Kylie was doing some fairly serious flirting that night. I'm guessing Brad is looking more and more attractive to her by the day, considering our financial difficulties and Brad's recent promotions. I have little doubt that had nature been allowed to take its course, something might well have happened that night. So the fact that nothing did doesn't exactly fill me with joy and optimism. On this topic, I find it interesting that during the last 2 days, I've had any number of intercessory phone calls from both Mum and Tula. The common theme is that I'd misjudged the situation. Mum: "They were just mucking around like they have for years." Tula: "Nothing has happened." Mum: "Kylie is so distraught. She keeps crying uncontrollably." Tula: "She feel hurt and no love by you." Mum: "Kylie says you haven't been yourself since Uncle Frank died." Tula: "She is lonely and just needs someone to talk with." Mum: "You should calm down and try to see it from her perspective." Tula: "I tell her, okay, Kiri, but you should still no have been alone in house with this man. She's so sorry. You must forgive her." Somewhat surprisingly, both Tula and Mum were unanimous on the last point. Even though nothing had happened, Kylie's and Brad's dinner had crossed the line, according to the moral codes of both mothers. Accordingly, appropriate promises had been extracted from her as part of the peace treaty being brokered. I followed Brad out into the car park beneath our building. As expected, Lana and Sonia are waiting next to Brad's company car, a Ford Territory that barely fits into the tiny parking space. Their conversation stops abruptly as soon as they see us approaching. I happen to know that both have a mountain of discoverable documents to sort through for a complex commercial litigation being run by Sylvester Cox. So, with considerable resentment, both women are also tagging along, knowing they will soon be nodding off to Brad's obfuscations at the whiteboard, while volumes of real work await their attention, much of it to be completed after hours. 9:15 p.m. I'm pulling in to Frank's house in Wanneroo. I've stopped at Nando's and picked up a quarter chicken meal. I no longer bother to tell Kylie what I'm doing. I figure that I have at least a bit of latitude left with Mum and Tula, and I'm determined to use it to its fullest extent. After turning off the house alarm, I head straight to the basement studio and prod the computer screen into action. I check emails and find copies of the ones Frank, or Samir, had sent to my work, along with a few earlier ones, bearing more or less the same information, but there is no word yet about his surgery. I realize it has only been 1 day, so I try not to worry. The smell of the Nando's chicken makes me remember that my meal is getting cold, so I head back upstairs, where I eat in echoing silence at the IKEA dining room suite, smothered by the lingering scent of recent masonry. Once I have finished and washed up, I move to the lounge and switch on the television, but I soon discover that Frank's old analog TV no longer works. He had never bothered to buy a digital set-top box. Oh well, if this Picklejig fellow is anything like Uncle Frank, he probably doesn't watch TV anyway. I go up to the bathroom, shower, change into some of Frank's clothes, and crawl into his bed. It briefly crosses my mind that Kylie will wonder where I am, but I'm so exhausted that I don't care. I just want to sleep. I also don't imagine Picklejig is going to turn up in the middle of the night. Just before I drift off, I wonder what sort of name that is, anyway. If Brad was ever right about anything, it was this. Fenjop's Picklejig does indeed sound like a joke. Then I recall the conversation with Justine at the Peking Palace, how similar Frank and Picklejig were, and the obvious hits me. There is no Fenjop's Picklejig. The name is just another of Frank's aliases. But if this is true, why didn't Frank use it after his death? Why go with Samir de Souza? Is Picklejig his plan C, the one he plans to use if he doesn't survive the surgery? How many more aliases does he have? The unanswered questions are still in my mind as I fall into a deep sleep, one that is peppered with dreams of Mr. Dixon eating Nando's and chastising me for my table manners, with Brad driving like a maniac through the streets of Rio, and with Justine, that curious juxtaposition of graceful lines and guffawing laugh.